All right, today we're tackling an absolute giant of literature, Shakespeare's King Lear. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A 400-year-old play? But trust me, this story about family, power, and what happens when it all goes terribly wrong, it is as raw and as real as anything you'll see today.
And this massive, devastating story really boils down to one simple question. How does a powerful king, a guy who has it all, right? The crown, the kingdom, the family, how does he end up a homeless man, literally screaming at the sky in a thunderstorm? It seems impossible. So let's dig in and figure out how it all fell apart.
Okay, so it all kicks off with, honestly, one of the worst ideas in literary history. We've got an aging King Lear, and he's decided it's time to hang up the crown. But instead of just, dividing things up, he gets this brilliant idea to stage a public love fest. He's going to give the biggest piece of his kingdom to whichever of his three daughters can flatter him the best. What could possibly go wrong?
And right away, you can see how this is going to go. First up are his older daughters, Goneril and Regan. They lay it on so thick, they give these gushing, over-the-top speeches about how their love is bigger than the whole world. It's exactly what Lear's fragile ego wants to hear. But then it's Cordelia's turn. She's his youngest, his absolute favorite, and she just won't play along. She basically says, "I love you like a daughter should." That's it. Her love is real, not some big public performance. And that word nothing just breaks him. Lear's pride is so huge that he can't see her honesty. All he hears is an insult, and he just snaps. In a blinding fit of rage, he disowns Cordelia on the spot. He banishes his closest friend for even trying to stick up for her. And then he turns around and gives the entire kingdom to Goneril and Regan, the two who just fed him a pile of lies. The first domino has fallen, and it is a big one. So here's the thing. Lear makes this fundamental mistake. He thinks he can give away all his power, the land, the army, the whole shebang, but keep the title and the respect that comes with being king. He could not have been more wrong, and he's about to find that out the hard way, and really, really fast.
I mean, the speed of his fall from grace is just breathtaking. We're talking weeks. One minute he's the absolute ruler of Britain, the next he's just an old man in the way. Goneril and Regan, who now have all the cards, they waste no time. They start chipping away at his dignity, cutting his retinue of knights, calling him a nuisance. Until finally, they throw him out. They refuse him shelter and just cast him out of his own kingdom.
And this is that moment of horrifying realization, that feeling when you know you've made a catastrophic mistake. All that sweet talk, all that flattery, it's gone. And all that's left is this cold, vicious betrayal. He's realizing, I gave them everything. And for what? To be tossed out into a storm like a stray dog?
So, there he is, an old king with nothing, abandoned by his children, wandering a desolate, empty landscape. And then, the heavens open up. A massive thunderstorm hits, and this right here, this is one of the most famous scenes in all of theater. The powerless king raging at the storm as his mind completely unravels.
Now, it's so important to get this. The storm isn't just a storm. It's a metaphor, right? It's literally everything that's going on inside Lear's mind. All the rage, the grief, the utter confusion erupting out into the physical world. The chaos outside is a perfect mirror for the chaos raging inside him. And at first, he's just defiant. He's out there shaking his fist at the sky, yelling at the wind and the rain, daring them to do their worst. It's like he's trying to command nature itself, the same way he used to command people. But the wind doesn't care. The rain doesn't stop. And his total powerlessness becomes painfully, terrifyingly obvious. But then, in the middle of all this madness and pain, something incredible happens. Something shifts in him. For the very first time, as he's shivering out there in the cold, he starts to think about other people. He thinks about all the poor, homeless subjects in his kingdom who've had to endure nights like this. It's wild, right? His own suffering finally opens his eyes to the suffering of others. He's gaining a kind of wisdom, but at a terrible, terrible cost.
All right, so this brings us to the final tragic act. Lear has lost literally everything, his power, his kingdom, even his sanity. But in the midst of all this wreckage, there's a glimmer of hope. He's found by Cordelia, the daughter he banished, who's come back with an army from France to try and save him.
Just look at this transformation. It's a complete tragic flip. He starts as a king. He has absolute power, but he's blind to reality. He ends as a prisoner. He has zero power, but he can finally see the truth. That's the cruel, brutal irony of the whole play. He had to be stripped of everything he thought was important just to understand what actually was. And this is just the final, gut-wrenching twist of the knife. He and Cordelia are captured, but for a brief moment in prison, Lear is actually happy. He doesn't care about being a king anymore. He's just happy to be with his daughter. But that piece is ripped away when Cordelia is executed, just senselessly murdered. And that final grief is just too much. It breaks him, and he dies right there, holding her body. So after all that devastation, you have to ask, why? Why do we still watch this play? Why do we still talk about it 400 years later? I think it's because it's like a giant 400-year-old mirror. It forces us to look at some of the hardest questions and deepest fears we all have. I mean, this play wrestles with the biggest questions imaginable, and it doesn't give you any easy answers. It asks, is the world just, or is it just cruel? Can you find wisdom through suffering? What do we owe our family? How do we deal with getting old, with facing our own death? And maybe the biggest one of all, after you've lost everything, how do you find any meaning at all? And maybe that's what it all comes down to. In a story that is just soaked in betrayal and cruelty, it's those small acts of loyalty from Cordelia, from a few others, that really stick with you, even though they end in tragedy. And so the play leaves us with this one final, really difficult question to chew on. In a world that can be so brutal, what is loyalty really worth?